It's amazing. I think like it's such a strong image. I've seen it referenced so many times over the years.
Hi!
Alright, babes. How are you doing?
How are you?
I'm good.
So excited to be here.
It's gonna be so good. I'm excited to get into that mind.
Come on then, Bimini.
Let's
go.
Oh, some masks. Gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
I love the fact that this is like kind of fetishy already as soon as you walk in. Yeah, straight away. It's like, woo. Well, I think we start right at the beginning. This is like her self-publishing, getting it started.
I think it's always really exciting to see works that started in zines in like traditional gallery spaces. I think it's so interesting as well how so many of the themes that started right at the beginning are still present throughout her career. Like I know if you looked at my work when I was 20, it wouldn't be the same as it is now.
Well, she must have been looking at the world through that lens straight away. And interesting, like kind of picking at that, it's like the female body in the kitchen. It's like a very, especially in the 70s. If you view that, the fact that she's like the lady in her bedroom posing, it's like kind of, she wants to pose with all the cameras looking at her. It's kind of like how today is.
It throws up loads of questions about like public versus private space. Like what do we do when the cameras are on versus what do we do for ourselves, which is obviously more relevant now than ever with like social media and how we present ourselves online. But to see that traced back all the way to the mid-70s is really interesting.
That's how I am on my own in my bedroom.
Yeah, same. All the time.
Always.
I'm wearing this exact outfit.
I love this wall.
Me too.
This pretty girls, like the cyborg, the fact that she's using like these 50s pornographic images that were obviously at the time would have been for the male gaze. These girls would have been told how to look, how to have their hair. It's like sexual for the man, these poses, but then just taking away their identity completely by putting these abstract, like random pieces, like even some of the bits that are like kind of kitchen utensils and like laundry. It almost like shows like also how men wanted women to be in that way.
I think it also presents like how we consume women, I guess. So like with porn, you're like, it's a consumption of a type of woman, a type of body image, a fantasy, all of these types of things, which I definitely think are also similar to like the fantasy of domesticity, for example, like the fantasy of like being the perfect wife, being the perfect, or having the perfect wife, being in the perfect marriage, and they're kind of both fake and they're both farces, and I feel like that's what these photo montages do really well, is kind of lay them on top of each other and expose like how ridiculous both things are.
Yeah. Also like totally embracing the bush. We love that.
Bush is back.
Yeah, because the 90s killed the bush.
She's back. These works were obviously created much later than the ones we were just talking about, but I think there's definitely parallels between them.
This would have been quite radical, I guess, like in the way that it is queerness. This is porn from the 70s. I think what Linder does a lot is, well, with everything, I think, is take a moment in time and then like kind of highlight it. I think with this, queer bodies embracing each other would have been so taboo. To kind of take that power, this would have been all underground and hidden. Like heterosexuality and the sexualization of what we view as like maybe the male gaze was not the same for gay people. So it was all like underground and like hidden. So I think just to kind of get that out there and like show it in that way, it kind of just again takes away the seriousness of it in a way. It like has that humor. This was a really controversial, but then also like look at this clock. A lot of people that would be queerphobic or homophobic would have probably seen those images and been disgusted.
Yeah.
But then that kind of, when she adds these things, it becomes
Obscures
inoffensive.
it. Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's no longer that. Like you cannot be like, oh, that's disgusting, which I think a lot of people would have done. To be queer and to be accepting of yourself is like one of the most radical things you can do. These were her own photographs. This was of a moment in time, I think, where she felt accepted and felt safe. She was going to queer spaces. I mean, we've seen drag queens in the 70s. Thank you for doing what you did.
I think you can tell from these images that like that safeness and intimacy was reciprocated by the queens as well. Like these are kind of moments where, you know, like they're getting ready or they're just like posing but in like a funny way, like intimate, soft moments that feel even more special when you consider like the time and the context in which that they were created.
And I think she's celebrating it.
100.
Because a lot of the works, the face is taken away, so that's like a lot of the identity. Whereas this is like shining, like you can see the expression, there's like something there. She's like not hiding this identity, she's celebrating it. These people should be free to be expressive. Yeah, I think it's beautiful. Drag night at a pub in Salford, we love that. But yeah, interestingly, sadly, she was experimenting with the photography and then she had a sexual assault. And to get out of being sexually assaulted, she gave her camera to the man, which is crazy because, I mean, it's amazing because her livelihood, obviously she was creating art using that, but like how much of her would have been taken if he'd actually gone through with it.
I think it also speaks to, you know, like people that create work out of necessity and like using the objects that they have around them. So like once the camera wasn't available to Linder, she was doing photomontage and like that she wasn't really restricted by medium, I think is really inspiring, especially now, you know, when we're seeing so many cuts to the arts, so many cuts to education.
What's really interesting is her bodybuilding from that as a retaliation. Instead of like getting married or like finding someone to protect her, she wanted to protect herself and did something that is also like kind of would have been radical and like anti-male gaze.
Exactly.
Strong women is something that men don't want or like, you know, especially ones that could probably outlift them on a bench. So like to do that, I feel like it just plays into like just how her mind works. I think it's like another middle finger up to societal views. I think what's really interesting about this is how she becomes the center point. Like a lot of the work is other people, but after that kind of traumatic experience, she decided to use herself as a canvas. She became the art that she wanted to do.
When she does appear in her works, it's kind of at these pivotal moments in which there's like a change in emotion or something happened to her that then takes the work in a different direction, which I think is really interesting. And I think her obsession with the word and the idea of glamour is also really interesting because glamour, how we know it, this is kind of like, it's not the opposite of glamour because it's still glamorous in its own way, but it's in like patriarchal glamour is not this. Linder tracing the word back to me like enchantment and witchcraft and all of these things. It's like the way that we can build ourselves and rebuild ourselves and shape ourselves is glamour.
And she's got great form.
Yeah, honestly, I would not know what good form looks like.
She's not like, she's not swinging that at all. So arguably Linder's most commercial or iconic piece of work?
Most recognisable, for sure. It's the Buzzcocks cover.
It's amazing. I think like it's such a strong image. I think like I've seen it referenced so many times over the years. And what's interesting is obviously in the 70s when this would have come out, I feel like this body type wasn't something that you would have probably traditionally seen. The tan, the oil, like it feels very 90s.
I feel like also it's like so many layers as with all of Linder's work. Like the nudity is like a first level of shock, especially when you're considering it being on like a punk record sleeve. But then it goes further and again, we've got like the iron and the idea of domesticity and like women and patriarchy and agency with like the mouths being in the tits. It's just very layered, I'd say.
And also interesting, like porn and page 3, for example, you're allowed to see a female nipple, but the nipple wouldn't be allowed to be exposed anywhere else. So she's covering the nipple there because the nipple is like the sexualized
part.
Everyone's got nipples. You know, men are allowed to have their nipples out, but like a female nipple is where it's too far. Like you have it on social media, it's crazy. So I love that that's a little nod because that wouldn't have been able to probably be sold in shops if that nipple wasn't covered. So thank God they covered that nipple.
I feel like as soon as you walk into this room, you're like drawn to these ones, and how could you not be?
The backstory of this is actually inspired by quite a dark time in Linda's life when her dad was sadly dying, and he was obviously like this. He would have been like the male figure, strong, and then she had to start feeding him. So it kind of takes away that, like, changes the dynamic between them, and like smashing up food. That's what is inspired by this, is the sploshing, which is like a fetish where people use a lot of food. So people like they get involved loads of stuff, cakes, smash it up, cover the body in it. But she discovered a fetish magazine, and this is what she got from that dark time. I think it's amazing when you see it in all of her work, like how she kind of flips it into kind of an angle that makes you look at it in a different way, but also it doesn't feel heavy. No, it doesn't feel heavy. It feels like it's saying something, but there's a lightness to it as well.
Yeah, I also think there's such an interesting link between like creating these images out of a time that Linder didn't have much control, and then in a way it's kind of like taking back control. And obviously so much of fetish is linked to like control and pleasure and all of those things. I feel like you can see it all through Linder's work.
Yeah.
But here it's particularly interesting because it's like, it's so abject, it's so like over the top. It seems that there's no rhyme or reason to it, but really it is controlled and it is curated and it is still an image.
It's also her inspiration from something as well. Like, sploshing is a widely known fetish for, well, for a lot of people, I don't know.
Yeah.
But she's taken it further. Like, it's like she was inspired by that fetish and this is what she's created. And I love that even though their identities are kind of taken away, their faces are still in there, there's still expression. They're wearing fetish clothes, like, which obviously you can't really see, but that's why fetish clothes are wiped clean.
And in two of these, Linder is like looking straight down the barrel of the camera again, which is just like asserting her agency as the artists in these images, which I think is really interesting.
So we've just gone 50 years through Linda's mind, and this is her most recent work.
Made for this exhibition.
It's touching on themes that is happening right now, but it's you can see the obvious inspiration from Dali, which I think is evident in a lot of her work, the surrealism, that kind of like hyper, crazy, different world. She's using an image of her in the 80s, and it's interesting how she's like using that to highlight about deep faking.
Which is creating porn using someone's face where they haven't consented, like through AI, which is obviously like so deeply dark and insidious. And I feel like Linda's kind of taking that on in this image as well. Again, how she's looking like straight to camera, like looks quite intimidating, but then everything in the background image is very like soft. It's all warm colors, like the clouds, like the body is very soft in it. And then it's kind of juxtaposed by this like very harsh black and white photograph of her, but then again softened by like the pearls and the gemstones. It's just like always playing with like lightness and
the
dark.
light and the shade, like there's the darkness where it's inspired from, and I think a lot of the like common themes about sexuality and like a kind of a zeitgeist moment into what is happening. This is her kind of interpretation of how with the deep faking and like how that is exploiting women or exploiting the female body. And then the first images we saw from the 70s where they got their photos on the head, she dehumanizes them by taking their face away, but then that's kind of what the sexualization has done there. So it's the common theme throughout everything. And I love that she's like, even today, finding things or finding ways to kind of create new art and be inspired. It's amazing.
Misogyny doesn't change.
No, it does not.
Just change his face. Yeah.
No, it's amazing. I think like her work is so incredible, and yeah, what an honor to have been able to see this.
Yeah, an
and
absolute
speak about
honor.
it.
Thank you for chatting about it with me.
Thank you, loved it. The art critic.
Get us a column.
Yeah.